All right. Good morning, everybody. And we're so glad to see everybody joining us this morning. We will start shortly. Our webinar today is Adulting 101, Building Critical Adulting Skills Before Your Student Leaves Home and is Ready to Come to UAB. So we're delighted to have Dr. Andrea Malkin Brenner today. And she is a wonderful presenter. We'll get to a lot of details in a few minutes. We're just watching people join us via Zoom and live on Facebook. So please join in, come on in, enjoy the presentation. We will get started in about a minute while we let everybody join in and be with us. And stay throughout the whole presentation. There will be a surprise at the end for those who are attending today. And thank you, Dr. Brenner, for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we're going to still give a few more minutes for people to join us. I see a few people joining us on Facebook, and we have a few people here on Zoom as well. So welcome, everybody. We're delighted to have you. And UAB is delighted to welcome today college transition educator, Dr. Andrea Brenner, to UAB to help us consider all the critical skills that your students, the first-year students especially, need to master before leaving home. And these are very useful tips that you will be receiving today. So during this session, Dr. Brenner will cover how you as parents can help your incoming students prepare to take care of their own physical and mental health, which is important, share their living spaces, understand the new responsibilities for personal safety, eating, sleeping routines, budget their money, all those little skills that they need to be successful while they're going through their academics, and how to handle stress, without the scaffolding of home or parents being with them. Dr. Brenner will speak about the transition to college, and she does this very often. I had the pleasure of meeting her during one of our higher education conferences, and she has worked with teens, with tens of thousands of first-year students, for over 25 years. And she is the creator of a wonderful deck of cards called Talking College, and of a best-selling book, How to College, for what to know before you and your student head off to college. So the good news is, if you stay throughout the whole webinar, at the very end, we will raffle a set of deck of cards and a book for those who are in attendance today. So without further ado, Dr. Brenner, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Carmen, and welcome to everyone. Just as Carmen mentioned, I have sort of been in the college transition space, working on college campuses for 25 years, most of them at American University in Washington, D.C. So I fancy myself a college insider. I'm a sociologist by trade and was a sociology professor for many, many first-year students, and as well as a university administrator. I also created several first-year experience courses at many different colleges, and I speak across the country at high schools and colleges all about the transition to college, both for students and their parents. And as Carmen mentioned, I am the co-author of the book, How to College, What to Know Before You Go and When You're There, and also a card deck called the Talking College Card Deck. And these are discussion prompts, all of the conversations that colleges want college-bound students and their parents to have before the students leave home. And that card deck is in English and in Spanish. So I'm going to start by telling you that I do things a little bit differently. I work backwards. And the reason I do this is because I'm a social scientist. As I mentioned, I'm a sociologist. So I really love data. And I love starting with the idea that we actually know where students are failing to thrive on college campuses in their first year. And I hope you're hearing me not saying fail, but fail to thrive. They're doing okay, but they're not necessarily thriving. And so what I do is I take that data from across the country. Where are students really failing to thrive? Where are they falling between the cracks in their first year? And I work backwards, talking to students who are heading off to college and to their families with kind of arms with that data. And so that's what I'm going to be presenting you with today. So the big question is, what aspects of college do they find themselves least prepared for? And this is actually a recent study of college sophomores looking back at the year before when they were freshmen and asking which aspects of college did you feel least prepared for? And you can see here, it might surprise some of you, others it might not, that the largest categories are academics, financial, and the social world. The largest one, of course, being academics. And when we see academics, I think as parents, I'm also a parent, we get a little anxious when we think, is my kid ready for college? And I think what's important to note is when we talk about academics and the transition and where students are failing to thrive, we're not actually talking about content area. Your student is absolutely academically ready for UAB. They have received acceptance to UAB. So that's not something you need to worry about. But what really we're talking about in that 30%, what were students not necessarily prepared for? Those are things that have to do with academics. They're adjacent to academics, but they're not content area. So for example, writing skills, listening skills, asking questions, learning how to skim books, read academic journal articles, and the big one would be study skills. So that's something to keep in mind. That's something I do in all of my resources that I publish, is really diving into talking about those academic skills adjacent to content area skills with students and making sure they really know how to do those skills. So let's talk a little bit about the myths of new college parents. So first one, there are a lot of parents I work with who believe that college-ready kids must excel academically and socially. And it is a rare college freshman who excels both academically and socially. Most students enter a college campus either a little bit behind in their study skills, or maybe some of those skills I mentioned, like note-taking skills or writing skills or skimming book skills. But socially, they're fine. We have other students who really have some social anxiety, and making friends is a challenge for them, but they excel academically. They know exactly how to manage their time when it comes to study skills. So if you are a parent and find that you have a student who is lagging behind in one of those two areas, you are not alone. Your student is not alone. And keep in mind that the faculty and staff at UAB are going to welcome your student with open arms. They are ready for what we'd like to call messy freshmen, freshmen who don't necessarily have it all completely figured out. Another myth of new college parents is that no one at college will get my kid like I do. And I talk to a lot of parents who say this to me, nobody knows my child as well as I do. And my answer is, of course they don't, and we shouldn't. You should know your child best. That said, we have an advantage, we being people who work on college campuses, we have an advantage that parents don't. And I'd love you to kind of picture the image of your child leaving for college, and you're kind of watching them walk off maybe to their new dorm with their roommate, and you're seeing the back of them. And there's an emotional pull there, right? You see not just that student at that age, maybe 17, 18, 19 years old, but you're seeing all of the baggage that comes with having parented that child for so many years, right? You're remembering maybe they were the last one in their class to learn how to tie their shoe, or that they didn't make it through that sleepover in third grade because they really wanted to be home. And so keep in mind that we do associate our children leaving for home with all of the other stuff of raising them. And that's hard to really extrapolate. But what's important for us to do is to kind of think about the fact that they are being welcomed on a college campus by faculty, professors, and staff, everyone else, who know how to work with the 18-year-old brain. So they may not know your kid, but they have worked with thousands and thousands of other 18-year-olds, and they've seen the mistakes and the challenges that those students make. So it's hard to do not to kind of see that baby walking away from you or having that pull at your heartstrings. But just remember, they're entering a college campus fresh as a brand new adult, and they are being judged with really a clean slate. Another myth of new college parents is that teens don't want to learn from us. That my kid doesn't want to learn from me. And in fact, data shows differently. It really shows that once we have the right conversation prompts and we sit down and start conversations about college with our kids and maybe teaching them some skills they don't know. Again, this is one of the reasons I created this card deck, is to actually put those prompts in parents' hands. We realize that teens are actually very, very interested in learning about their parents' transition. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean their parent had to have gone to college. It works just as well for first-gen families as parents who have been to college. But every parent at some point left home as probably a young adult, and talking about that transition, talking about what made them anxious, what they were excited about, what they were fearful of. Those are really important conversations. And teens actually do want to hear those stories, and they want to learn from their families. The college process ends with acceptances. This is another myth. In fact, the college process does not end with acceptances. There is no special magic letter that comes when you open your acceptance letter that you have all of those adulting skills. Actually, the process starting preparing kids to transition away from home often starts when they do get their acceptance letter. And then finally, other kids have it all together. And I was hoping that you realize that is not the case, that many parents are going through the same thing and having the same concerns. So 5 major points I'm going to cover today. The first one is defining the differences between the role of a high school parent and the role of a college parent. There are quite a few differences. The next, I'm going to talk about encouraging and normalizing things like mistakes and challenges, and not only talking about those things, but really planning ahead for how your student will handle when those mistakes and challenges arise, because there's no way there aren't going to be some issues in their first semester of college. Also, I'm going to talk about working early on some teachable and important college life skills in the weeks you've got left before your students head off. And with your student, not instead of your student, but with your student, exploring ways for them to get campus connected even before they arrive for move-in day, and really start preparing them for some of those big differences between high school and college. And finally, shifting the language that we use with our students when we talk to them to student-centric, to the student as the problem-solving lead, so we can start to discuss some really important college level scenarios. So let's move into the first one, defining roles. So defining roles for the colleges do a great job of kind of telling you as incoming families what their role is. They also do a great job of telling you the role of the college student. What it really is, there's no rule book for it, is that there's no rule book for how do you shift from the role of a high school parent to the role of a college parent. And I would say an overarching theme, and this has nothing to do with how wonderful the family engagement office is at UAB. I know them well, and they are wonderful. But college parents in general are not super prepared for the differences and how their role is going to change. So that's what I hope to cover today. So here's a chart. And you can look at some of the differences between the role of the high school parent and the college parent. And of course, it's not one size fits all. Every family is different. So you might not feel that every single one sounds or looks like you or your family. But this is, I would say, across the board. Often parents in high school help their children stay organized, where college parents are not going to be that organizational person. They're actually going to move to the role of supporter. That doesn't mean our students are going to go from dependent to independent overnight. In fact, it means as parents, we need to learn about those campus resources. So when our student says, I need help, we're not the people that reach out to help them, but we encourage them to find their own resources on campus. And if we are prepared for what those resources are and know most of these resources are included in your tuition dollars, it's really, really important to kind of be armed with that so we can help our students find the right support, not necessarily being us. High school parents, and I would even argue K through 12 parents, do a great job of fixing things. We're excellent fixers. We've been doing since our kids were babies. But what you're going to need to know is that once you're a college parent, you no longer are the one to do the fixing, but you are going to encourage your student to do the fixing. And so I'm going to talk a little bit on the next slide about the federal law called FERPA, which protects a student's rights and responsibilities. And that really throws us into the role of encourager rather than fixer, because we don't have access to many of the things we had access to when our students were in high school. Often high school parents remove obstacles. You may have heard the term snowplow parent. That's kind of taken the role from the helicopter parent. We used to hover, and now we kind of plow the snow away, so there are no obstacles. Well, that doesn't happen in college. We need to step aside for the student to traverse those obstacles themselves, and there will be obstacles. If you're like me and you hear your mother's words ringing in your head while you live under my roof, that obviously changes when your student is no longer living under your roof. So what do we mean by that? And what does that mean when our students come back, maybe for Thanksgiving, to visit home? Even though it is their home, they now have a new place that they can call home. High school parents often provide daily reminders and reiterate expectations, right? Here's what I expect of you. I sound like a broken record. Those are because we are repeating ourselves again and again. And high school parents, very different than college parents, do provide those reminders. Do you have your paper for history? Have you studied for your chemistry test? Do you have your soccer uniform with you? Did you remember your lunch? Well, we don't know the day-to-day life of our students when they're in college, and we no longer are going to be providing daily reminders. So the earlier, the better in terms of stopping doing that. So I'm going to talk very briefly about FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. As I mentioned earlier, it's a federal law that protects all of the students' records. So regardless if your student is age 18, as long as they are in college enrolled, unless your student signs a FERPA waiver, which is provided by every college, you are not going to have access to your students' disability accommodations, their grades, their academic progress. You're not going to know if your student is on probation, etc. So this is something you need to talk about. People always ask me, well, what do you think? Should we have our students sign a FERPA waiver? And that is an absolutely familial decision. I would never put my own opinions, but do keep in mind that there isn't just a black and white area. There is a gray area as well. My own family lives in a gray area. When my own kids went to college, we did not have them sign a FERPA waiver. We were going to make the assumption that they were going to handle things on their own. But we did put some stipulations. We expected our student to tell us if they were on academic probation. We expected to see their grades every semester. And this was something that we made a family rule. And my kids made it through without the FERPA waiver. I know lots of families who have their students sign the FERPA waiver. That's a great place to start if you feel like you need a little more control of watching over your student. But do keep in mind, families should be prepared for these new realities and responsibilities. And do know that this law was created to protect a student's privacy with the understanding that most college students are actually able to handle all these things on their own. I'm not a huge fan of the term overparenting. We hear that a lot, and I don't believe there's such a thing, actually. I believe that as students, we do things for our students, as parents, we do things for our kids out of the goodness of our hearts because we love them. We don't try to do things that overparent. So I love to refer to it as sort of loving support versus detrimental enabling. And I have a picture of a teacup right there. And that's kind of an insider, college insider tip, is that there is a term on college campuses used by professors and some staff as well, where they will refer to freshmen as teacups, well, specifically freshmen who are so kind of fragile that they could break with their first bad grade. And so, think about that when you handle talking to your student. If they call you with a situation, they got a terrible grade, maybe it's their first time getting a terrible grade, maybe they've been a great student in high school, and college academics are really challenging for them. Think about loving support versus detrimental enabling. How can we offer support without being a fixer and really not having our students crumble if it's the first challenge or mistake that they make? I also think that perspective taking is crucial, and I think it's something that's overlooked. And so I want to give you my favorite example on the idea of perspective taking, and that is college move-in day. So here we have a family with a college student and her mom and her dad. And if you think about it, when you move your student into college, if you are indeed going to be the ones to actually move your student in, we hear a lot of new college parents say, this is the last day we can spend time as a complete family. It's a big day for a lot of families. They might bring younger siblings or grandparents with them, or boyfriends or girlfriends, and all of the students' stuff. And they might find themselves taking a whole lot of pictures with their student before the room is set up, after the room is set up, with the school mascot, with a picture of their dorm, with the school banner, whatever it might be, because students and parents are thinking about this day very differently. New college parents are also picturing it as a last day, as kind of the final hurrah. And that's why a lot of colleges have actually stepped up and said, all right, parents, 4:00 is the parents, goodbye ice cream sundaes, because it's time for them to kind of leave. And So what's interesting, if you think about perspective taking for the new college student, they don't think about this as a last day. They think about this as a first day. And again, this is the first day of my new life. I want to new people. I want to explore without my family in tow. There's not one right way to look at move-in day or this perspective taking. There's not a wrong way at all. We just need to look at both perspectives. So my advice to incoming parents is whatever you think about, especially if something is emotional in this transitional time, try not only to look through your own eyes, but also through your students' eyes, because they might be seeing this very differently. The second thing is encouraging and normalizing mistakes. And I think it's really important to normalize mistakes and kind of talk about how your child will handle some of them. So here are some common first-year college student challenges. Time management, as I mentioned earlier, is a big one. Students have more free time than they've ever had in their life, and a lot of students have trouble managing their time in college. Some students have roommate disagreements. There is a wonderful residence life association that's going to be able to help your student and their roommate if there are disagreements. Many schools, I don't know if UAB is one of them, but many schools encourage roommate contracts so that students living with somebody new can actually have a living document that they can twist and turn as their needs become more and more apparent. Lots of students get homesick, and when I talk to parents, a lot of them say, "Oh, they're going to miss me." And in fact, it's not necessarily the mom or the dad that students miss. Students actually report missing animals, pets. They also report missing siblings. But the biggest thing they're homesick for is the ease of home, right? Of opening the refrigerator and amazingly there's food in it. Opening the cabinet and amazingly their favorite snacks are there. And of course, that doesn't happen in college without the student going out purchasing those items. So the ease of home is something that a lot of first-year students are homesick for. A lot of students do struggle with their health, either physical health or mental health. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Course selection, especially at a big school like UAB, is another one. I think a lot of students come to college with this myth that the first year of college are going to be able to finally take all of these really exciting classes that they didn't get to take in high school, advanced astrophysics or whatever it might be. And they are across the country sorely mistaken. And a lot of them are let down because they realize that there are a lot of core classes, a lot of intro level classes that they need to take as first year students. And finally, and maybe even most importantly, not being accepted into a group of choice. Your students might be, the best theater kid or the best trumpet player or soccer player in their high school. And all of a sudden they're entering an environment where a lot of those best of from different high schools are. And so it might be your student not getting into Greek life, a fraternity or sorority. It might be an a cappella group or writing for the school newspaper. And that, they may have to try a couple of times before they're accepted into that group of choice. And that can be challenging for some students. So those were challenges. Here are some common first-year college student mistakes. So the first one is losing or breaking something important. Just prepare yourself. This is going to happen, not just in the first year, but in the first semester of college. Your student will lose or break something important. Hopefully not as important as a laptop, but, have a plan. What happens if your student loses their winter coat? What happens if their cell phone is cracked, etc. Talking about all of these situations in advance is a great idea. Another common first-year student mistake is not using campus resources. UAB and every other school talks about, as they should, how many wonderful campus resources there are. Everything from the counseling center to a fitness center, spiritual life, clubs and organizations, etc. But those are only useful campus resources if students actually cross the threshold and begin to use them. Next is making poor financial decisions, hopefully not large poor financial decisions, but students often run out of money in their meal plan or make a poor financial decision. And I spent a lot of time in my card decks talking about working with your kids on budgeting and figuring out if they actually understand how credit cards work and things like that. So that's really important, very important conversations to have. A big one is not asking for academic help. Actually, studies show, if you can believe it, that majority of students in college across the United States don't start regularly attending office hours until their spring of their sophomore year. And that's not good. We need to get students in office hours as early as possible, meeting with professors, realizing it's not that scary, going and asking for academic help, going to meeting with TAs, finding a writing center or a tutoring center on campus. There'll be lots of academic resources for your students. Getting over-involved or under-involved is another student mistake made by a lot of first years. And I think the question comes down to, what is getting over-involved? How many clubs and organizations should my child join? And I like to say that a rule of thumb is 3. Of course, every family is different. But if your student goes in thinking, I'm going to do 3 different things outside of my academics, 1 for myself, that's fun. 1 for others, that's, volunteer work, giving back in some way. And the 3rd for my career path or the path towards my major. So that might be like a business fraternity or an economics club. So if your student can kind of center on 3, not 100, not just 1, it really will find a sweet spot. And it's much easier in college to drop a club or organization. You don't have to worry about being on your college transcripts anymore. So students do probably want to look for leadership opportunities once they are involved in clubs and organizations. They're usually led by juniors and seniors. And the earlier the better to reach out and find out the clubs and organizations that are on that campus before that student activities fair. There's a little picture here of a student activities fair on a college campus, especially for students with social anxiety. They can be very, very overwhelming. And then students, sadly, most first years do make some sort of poor social decision, sometimes involving drugs and alcohol, sometimes involving friendships. And these are conversations that if you're comfortable having with your students, I really, really encourage you to do so. Number 3, begin early to work on the teachable life skills your kids will need before they head off to college. And of course, these aren't just college skills, these are adulting skills. So here's a list of just some college level life skills. Your students should know how to do laundry, iron, and basic sewing. Why iron? My kid is always a mess. I hear a lot. Eventually, if not their first year, they'll have an internship in one of their years of college, and they really should know how to wear, a colored shirt or, a business casual outfit that they know how to iron. They should know how to read schedules to book travel for themselves. If that's something you've done with them or for them before, you should show them how to do it or turn it over to them. They should know simple meal prep that includes cooking, baking, toasting, microwaving, and knife skills. Even though they'll be on a meal plan, they will have access to a kitchen in most dorms, and that's really important for them to come to college with a recipe or 2 from home that are not too complicated, something that they like that reminds them of their home or their culture. Students should know how to care for and clean their living spaces. That includes, the difference between a surface cleaner and a window cleaner. They should know how to sweep, vacuum. They should know how often to take out the trash, change their sheets, etc. They should know how their family is paying for college and the cost of that college. That's not something that should be hidden. They should also understand what financial aid is covering if they have scholarships, etc. Your students should know how to use a phone to make appointments and ask for help. This generation is great in terms of texting, but they're not wonderful with speaking on the phone. Of course, the people they're going to be talking to are all adults on college campuses. So it might be a professor, it might be a financial aid counselor. They're going to need to know how to use the phone to make appointments. They should have memorized their social security number. It's for domestic students. And they should also know what kind of information to keep confidential, where to keep passwords, how to memorize things rather than write them down on their phones. They should know the basics of health insurance. What is a copay? How do I fill prescriptions? And again, in my card decks, in my book, I talk a lot about all of these basics of health insurance. They don't have to be experts, but they should know some simple things. They should know how to treat common illnesses, manage medication dosages. The last thing they want to do is, if they have 101 fever, is to wander the aisles of CVS looking for medication. They should go to college with a little wellness kit and know how to use them. As I mentioned earlier, students should know how to record and keep a budget and write a professional email and leave a professional voicemail. And these are all things that they can practice before they head off to school. With your student, I encourage you to explore ways for them to be connected on campus and kind of help them prepare for some of these differences. So, as I mentioned earlier, don't wait until the campus activities fair to learn about the clubs and organizations on campus. This is one of the, silver linings to our pandemic is that colleges have put all of their student activity lists online. And so that's something your student can start exploring. They can probably even go on the Facebook pages or the Instagram pages of all of their clubs and organizations and see what those clubs are doing. They can reach out to the student leaders and say, I'm an incoming student and I play the trumpet. I'm interested in this jazz band, etc. So don't wait till that first day. It's a wonderful feeling if your student actually comes armed with some of this information and does go to the activities fair and they really know which clubs or organizations they want to look at. Also, with your teen, it's important to begin checking out some of those campus resources that your child will want or your child will need. So if your student might need a counseling center or find a referral for an off-campus therapist locally, you can do that all through the counseling center. Again, go to the counseling center's webpage and find that out. The health center can also direct you to an off-campus medical provider if you're coming from out of state. The Career Center is a great place to look at online, check out all of the resources that they have, including helping your student get work in college or summer jobs, as well as internships. If a religious or spiritual community is important to your child, that's something they can start looking for in advance. They also should know all about those academic help resources, tutoring, advising, faculty, TAs, etc. What exists on my campus? What exists in my major? And then if your student needs disability and learning support, it's never too early to start reaching out. That's not something that your students should wait till they arrive on campus to learn. Here's a chart. This actually comes from my book. I know it's a lot of text on a slide, and I never ever encourage students to put this much text on a PowerPoint, but I do want to make sure that you know all of these things. So these are the biggest differences between high school and college when it comes to academic standards. So the first one is time management. And in high school, most schools begin and end at the same time each weekday. Your student attended approximately 35 hours of class. No wonder why high school students, especially those who work or do extracurriculars after a school day, are so exhausted. And they may take up to 7 different types of classes. That might be different. They have to switch their brain 7 times. In college, classes meet 1 to 3 times per week, and they're usually scheduled in a variety of ways. So they may wake up on a Tuesday and have class all day and all evening, and then Wednesday have absolutely no class. Or one day they may start class late, or they may finish class at 11 a.m. And they're going to have fewer subject areas. Most college students take between 4 and 5 different subject areas in a term. Very different between high school and college. They're sitting in a classroom far less, which means they have a lot more free time, which in some ways is terrific. And in other ways, those can really be time wasters, especially for students who might be addicted to gaming or Netflix or naps, etc. So it's a conversation worth having. Excuse me. In terms of professionalism and personal responsibilities, in high school, parents legally can contact the school, they can contact counselors, teachers, even the principal. They can ask about work that's due, and they have a sort of an appropriate relationship. Hopefully by the time they're seniors in high school, students are doing most of the communication. But legally, the parents can reach out to a high school and those teachers and ask for how their student's doing. And in college, it's very different. Unless there is a FERPA waiver signed, the student is responsible for all contact with professors. And even if there is a FERPA waiver that is signed, the professor is not going to call parents or even answer the phone for parents. And academic resources are what the student has to find. Students responsible for all their deadlines, where in high school, teachers often send reminders of work due. It doesn't happen as readily in college. You may have heard your high school students say, I didn't do well on this particular quiz, but that's okay, Mom. I have 8 more assignments in this particular course this semester. And they're right, this marking period. But in college, it's different. A class may only have 2 grades. The feedback is less frequent, really requires going to office hours and talking to faculty in order to assess your progress. And those grades are going to be weighted much more heavily because you'll have fewer of them in college. In high school, teachers often explain readings and relevant concepts in class. So if a student is doing an assigned reading in high school and they're confused by it, for example, a math class, they might think, this is really confusing, but it's okay because it'll be explained in class tomorrow. And they're actually right. In college, it's different. College professors have such limited time with their students. Most colleges have 14 weeks of a semester. And if your student is only meeting twice a week for class, they only have 28 class times in that particular college class during one term or one semester. And so faculty don't waste time in class, which is already limited, explaining things. They assume if a student is confused, which is completely okay that they were confused, they are making the assumption that the student has figured it out before the next class. That might mean going to office hours, might mean going to an academic help center or lab, reaching out to a peer, reaching out to even an undergraduate TA to ask for help. But they should really make sure that they are not that they're ready for the next class, having read and being prepared with everything that was assigned. So that's a big difference between high school and college. And I do think a lot of schools do not necessarily prepare students for college level work. And then finally, shifting our language with the student as the problem-solving lead and beginning to discuss college scenarios, wellness, and upcoming decisions. And this is, Carmen had mentioned my Talking College card decks. I know we're raffling off one at the end of the program. This is one of the things that I focus on is how do you actually start these conversations? So I would start by saying there is what we call the stress-distress continuum. And on one end of it is stress, which is kind of a normal feeling. Low ranging stress is kind of normal for every college student on a daily basis. Unlike the pain scale, which you see here, where 0 is no, I would say there's no such thing as a stress-free college student. And if there is, they're doing something wrong. Maybe their classes are not as challenging as they need to be. So I would say somewhere around 1 or 2 is kind of an average college student's level of stress. They're stressed about something. It might be a roommate situation or something with friends or extracurriculars or a class that they're maybe not doing so well in. That's kind of the low level stress that they might be experiencing. On the other end of the continuum is distress, right? So taking the word stress and moving into distress. And distress is actually when a student can't handle their stress by themselves. It's escalated to such a place where they really need outside help to help them solve whatever problem it might be. Ideally, you as a parent is not the person who's going to be the number one call in distress. You certainly might get the text, and hopefully you will encourage your students to seek resources on college campuses. RAs, resident assistants, resident directors, counseling center, those are great places to start if your student is really feeling extreme stress. But I like to have this pain scale here, not because I'm expecting your student to go to the emergency room after a broken arm, but because I think it's an important conversation to have. When does their stress turn into distress? Is it easy? Are they an easy stress to distress? Are they at number 3 when it's kind of like a low level stress and they immediately shoot into, oh my gosh, the sky is falling? Or are they someone who kind of rides out stress and then really becomes the worst possible scenario when they start to experience distress? And so I encourage the families I work with to think about a 0 to 10 scale, knowing that nobody's at 0 level of stress, kind of figuring out, because every kid's different, where do you shoot from mild to moderate or moderate to severe? What's your number? Now, when your child calls you from college and they have elevated emotions, maybe they're angry, maybe they're upset, maybe they're whatever it might be, and you can hear elevated emotions, and it's the worst day, and I want to transfer, and I can't stand it here, and everything is going wrong. Instead of actually hearing the words, the narrative, it's a great idea to switch to a number system. It's much more easy for that child to say, or for you to say, are you at a 6 yet? Knowing that 6 might be your kid's trigger, or are you at a 3? And it really enables them to kind of go back into their head and put a number to their feeling, because words can often really panic us as parents. So these are from my card decks. What would you do scenarios? And again, these are scenarios that college campuses have given me. So are you, student, able to narrate your personal health history to a medical provider? If you sprain your ankle and ends up in the emergency room and you're given the clipboard and they say, fill out your health history, are you able to do that? Another question is, how would you care for a friend who has passed out from alcohol use? Does your student actually know how to, what to do, who to call, how to take care of that student in the immediate? And it really doesn't matter if your student takes part in partying or drinks. You may say, I have a student who does not use any alcohol at all. That's fantastic. But they're going to be surrounded by peers who do. And what will happen in that situation? Because students should really feel comfortable rather than panicked. How might you approach a situation, student, where a new college friend cannot afford things you can afford, or where you can't afford things others can? This happens a lot on college campuses. They're much more diverse environments economically than the high schools our students attended. Those are much more homogeneous in terms of socioeconomic status. And so you might have a student who really can't afford to have pizza off the meal plan because their meal plan is completely covered by their scholarship. And so how do you have that conversation talking across social class? It's a big one. And then practice reflective listening. I love this as advice for new college students. If your student comes into a room in his last couple of weeks before they leave and they have heightened emotions about something, and instead of immediately moving into the role of fixer, take a beat and then ask your student, do you want to just vent right now, or do you want me to help you problem solve? First of all, if you've never done this before, a lot of times the student will be quite surprised by that question. And then I think you will be pleasantly surprised when you hear the student say, I'm really just upset or angry or whatever. I just want to vent. I really don't want your help problem solving. And that's what we can do as parents to help them become their own problem solvers. Another great tip, and again, I did not create reflective listening. It's in adolescent psychology classes all across the country, but trying to use I language as parents rather than you language to keep our kids off the defensive. So for example, you say your student asks if they can take the family car to a party before they leave home, and you say sure, but it's far away, and so when you get there, I just want you to text to let me know you're there. And your student borrows the car and they get to the party, that's far away, and they of course don't text you. They slip their mind, they've got involved with something else. Do you text your student or call your student and say, you promised to call as soon as you got there? And if you do, your student's only response is going to be defensive. Oh, I had a this, I had a that, somebody needed me, etc. So if you can shift your language from you messaging to I messaging, I get really nervous when I don't hear from you when you promise to call or text. It is much better received. It's not 100% win, but it works in many situations. And it's something I encourage you to try to use as you're starting to talk to your young adult as a young adult rather than a child. Another thing I think we do very poorly in our society is defining adulting. And so I want to talk for a minute about this. Sitting down with focus groups and interviews with college-bound students. So these are just graduating high school, about to head off to college. When asked in focus groups and interviews, what does it mean to be an adult? They will say a couple of things. One is going it alone. It means doing it completely independently, not relying on others. Other students will say, it's a mystery, I have no idea. But the majority of them will say it means doing it alone. Where if we sit down with adults in focus groups and interviews and say, what is adulting? What does it mean to be an adult? Adults, 40 plus years old, will kind of think for a minute and they'll say, it means using my resources, asking experts. What do I do if I don't know something? I reach out to somebody who does, right? An expert, or it might be a friend. If we have a family crisis, maybe a death in the family, we reach out and ask for help. I need your support. This is how I need it. And we also own our own mistakes. We're much better at that than our 18 to 22-year-olds for sure. So I do think redefining adulting is an important conversation. I also talk about this in my card decks and in my book. I find really, really important to kind of tease out what our college-bound students think adulting means, and then tell us what we think. Tell them what we think adulting means, and kind of tease out what it actually really does mean, which is not relying on ourselves, but actually knowing our resources. So I would say encouraging your teens to reframe their language from mom, dad, what should I do? To mom, dad, I have a problem. I've thought it out. Here's my plan. What do you think? Now, this doesn't mean that our students are always going to have great plans. Sometimes our students will tease out ideas and their ideas aren't so great how to solve problems. But we can then add our own 2 cents or say, I love the first part of your plan, but maybe you can think about the second plan this way or tweak it this way. But this is what they should be doing, is really starting to reframe their own language rather than asking for immediate help. And our response is, if our kid says to us, what should I do, is, well, what do you think you should do? Right. And so that's become something that with a lot of families I work with, where I just send it back to the student, think it out, come to me with a plan, and then we can assess how your plan looks. I don't expect it to be perfect. So what about now? I would say in the weeks you've got left, first, tease out your child's specific needs for growth. I mentioned academic and I mentioned emotional or psychosocial growth. Think about where your child might struggle in college and start talking to them about that. Think about ways young adults in your family can step up and parents can step back. It might be anything from making a meal to making decisions, to booking their travel, to making their last dentist appointment before they leave home. These are things that parents have done for so long, and it's a time for them to say, you know what, you're a young adult, you need to start taking the reins, because it's easy for us to do it as parents. We're really good at these things. Next, I would say, remember that roles for high school parents are different for the roles of college parents, and understand that growing up is not the same as being a grown-up. That's really, really important. Colleges, as I mentioned early, expect messy first-year students. So don't worry if your student is still rough around the edges, with the goal of helping your teens help themselves and for them to really take the central role as they prepare for the transition from home to college. So that's it for my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. If you follow me on social media, I do lots of free giveaways. There's lots of free, wonderful webinars. I also tell you about webinars that other people are giving. This QR code takes you to my talkingcollege.com website. You can also go to talkingcollege.com and learn about the resources, some prompts for conversations, and purchase them if you're interested. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brenner, for being with us here today. This is, as a parent myself, now I think back going, oh, if I had only thought of that. So for incoming families, regardless if this is your first student, your third student, all of our students are different. All of our kids are different. So these are just wonderful tips that you can have in order to have those conversations. I love the fact that we think of adulting as adults. We see the definition is quite different from what it means for an incoming student. So at this time, if you would like to submit any questions, you can do so through our Q&A button here on Zoom, or I see some of you on Facebook. So to the ones on Facebook, I'm going to ask 2 favors. One is to send me your name so I can put you in the little pot for the raffle. We're going to be raffling 1 book that will be mailed to you, or 1 deck of cards, so you can start having those conversations. So if you have any questions, this is a wonderful time. We have an expert here who has been both in the college field as a parent and who is here willing to explain some of these things to you. So please send me your name, of course, if you're on Facebook, or submit your questions here. We still have a few more minutes while you submit some of those questions or things that are on your mind. And if not, look at the QR code and you can get more information. While we wait for questions, I just wanted to let our families know, and I'm sorry about showing you this way. This is Blazer Well, and it is a publication that you will be receiving in the mail within the next couple of weeks. And it is a Blazer family guide to have those conversations with your students about health and well-being. So it will be mailed to you within the next couple of days. And I know Dr. Brenner mentioned, students will make mistakes, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's that they're looking to make those mistakes. They may be involved in situations. So being prepared and having this guide, I think, will also be a helpful instrument to have those conversations. I am looking at our both Facebook, and that's why I keep turning, looking for questions. Definitely send me your name so I can put you in that raffle for the 2 resources. Again, I'd like to invite you to submit any questions right now. And while you do, Dr. Brenner, is there anything else that any last minute thoughts, tips that you would like to leave our families with?
No, I would just say breathe. It's going to be good. And, remember, you're not sending your kids out into nowhere. You're sending your kids to UAB is one of my favorite campuses to visit. And it's a wonderful place filled with lots of caring people. And, your students will find mentors. It may not happen on day one, but they will be there, and they just need to acknowledge that there's stuff they don't know and ask lots of questions.
And that is very important. The same for you families. If you have any questions, send us an email. You can email us at families@uab.edu. Of course, visit our website, uab.edu/families. Register for Family Weekend, which is coming in October. All of these are great opportunities for you to stay in touch. And one thing I like that Dr. Brenner mentioned is we see this as the last moment before a student goes to college. This is the last night, the last meal. It is hard for us as parents, and I put myself in that group as well, but also see this as a great new beginning for them. And we're there with them for that journey, not just you as parents, but also here at UAB and experts like Dr. Brenner. We're all here rooting for you. We're all here for you to help you through this journey. So please let us know if there's anything that we can do. I am not seeing any questions coming in right now, Dr. Brenner, either through Facebook or through Zoom. So please, if you have additional questions later, you can always send them to UAB families@uab.edu, and we will be glad to route those questions to Dr. Brenner. Thank you again for joining us today. If you have missed any of our webinars, you can see them live on Facebook. You can see them recorded on Facebook and on our website, uab.edu/families under communications under 2023 webinars. And they are there for you to view again. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Brenner. I don't see any questions coming in.
Carmen, do you want to do the raffle?
Well, I'm waiting for the names to come in through.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I'm not seeing any names coming in through Facebook. So, I see one name. Thank you, Regina. All right. So I think we can with the people we have. So let us go ahead, and if you can give me a number between 1 and, for now, we're going to do 1 through 8, or 2 numbers, 1 through 8. And there is a question before we go there.
Okay.
Oh, Holly, I see you, Holly. Thank you. All right. So 1 through 8. Can you give me 2 numbers?
I'll give you number 2 and number 6.
All right. Awesome. All right. So what we will do is I'll go back through the list, and I will send you a message number 2. Okay. And we have Rajaram. So I'll be sending you a message, and you said number 6. And we have, I think we have Tina Graham, and she's there as well. So thank you, everybody. You'll be getting a message from us, and then we will be mailing. I'll just verify your email address, and we will go from there with your book and your cards. So thank you, Dr. Brenner, again, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you during Move-In Week and throughout the 4 years that you'll be here. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.